Hi, this is Chase from CNC Commentaries, and today on CNC Movie Breakdowns, we're going to be continuing our venture through the Shires and Middle-earth, and we are going to be talking about The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. And I'm, of course, joined by my favorite hobbit, Nando.
Hi. I'm a hobbit. I'm your favorite
Yes.
hobbit.
Well, I know you're a hobbit because of your hairy feet, so...
I'm definitely in the top 10, don't worry.
Yeah. How's it going?
Not bad. We're talking about the second film in the trilogy here.
We're continuing our way through.
Yeah, Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. And yeah. It's pretty solid. I'd say the same rules applies for this episode and last episode. We're not going to be going scene by scene. We're just going to be...
I don't think we have time for a 4-hour podcast.
Yeah, I have
as much as we'd like.
Neither the time or sanity for 4 hours. But yeah, so we're just going to be going generally, what we think and things such as that. But yeah. Nice. Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, Chase.
Yes.
So it's a big movie, that's for sure. This one is longer than the first one.
That is a true statement. Should we give a little synopsis of this film?
Yeah, sure. Alright, so Lord of the Rings, Two Towers, it came out in 2002. It was directed by Peter Jackson, as the first one was. And it continues the story of Frodo the Ring Bearer and the Fellowship of the Ring. Fellowship's pretty broken up at this point, and just continues their journey, and now they're continuing their journey to Mordor, and they certainly faced quite a challenges along the way. It's not this movie, I feel like, is definitely darker than the first. There's a lot more death in this one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this movie also won. This movie definitely won some Academy Awards, just like all of these. And, it's pretty critically acclaimed, and I think it's pretty solid. It's pretty great. But, yeah.
I guess without further ado, let's dive on it.
Yes. Alright, this movie starts with a recap of the first movie. So we have a little scene of them recapping, and then we see Gandalf fall in the mines with the Balrog, and we get kind of an extended fight of Gandalf fighting with the Balrog, and they crash into water, and Gandalf supposedly dies, and then Frodo wakes up, and it was a dream. And now we're back with Frodo and Sam. They are continuing their journey, just the two of them, because they abandoned the Fellowship. And Frodo is he's having more trouble with the ring this time. They're obviously going through harsher terrain, and it's just him and Sam. And with him carrying the ring for so long, it's starting to take effect on him. That's something we see throughout this whole movie. Is that Frodo is not having a great time. And we also meet Gollum, or Smeagol.
Yes, we do meet Gollum.
Yes, Gollum shows up.
Played by Andy Serkis.
Yes, Gollum shows up because he wants the ring, and because he got the ring robbed by Bilbo many years ago, and so he's been following the ring, and he wants it. But then when they meet him, Gollum tries to jump them at first, but then he's quickly overpowered by Frodo and Sam. And then Gollum is like, "Okay, I'll show you the way to Mordor." And Gollum eventually shows them the way to Mordor, and he's now.
They basically just, they meet up with him, and then they just, put him on a leash and drag him around, and have him, force him to show them where to go.
Yes.
And Gollum isn't exactly the best guests to be traveling around with.
No, Gollum's got like split personalities. He's pretty insane.
Well, and also just, the fact you're just walking along, like, down a path, and then he just rips into, like, a rabbit. Not entirely, appealing.
Yeah, it's not exactly the best. And, Gollum is a bit crazy, and the reason he's like this is that Gollum was a hobbit. He was Smeagol. And then he found the One Ring, and he murdered another hobbit over the One Ring. And after so many years with the One Ring, it eventually degraded him to what he is now. It gave him an unnaturally long life, and it messed with his head. And now he's kind of on, like, ring withdrawal, where all he wants to do is get the ring. But yeah, he agrees to show them. And, yeah, although he's not exactly happy about it at first. He still decides to do it. But anyway, enough about Gollum for now. Merry and Pippin have been kidnapped by orcs.
Yes, of course.
And these are special orcs. These are more intelligent. They're Saruman's orcs, and now they've been captured, and they're trying to bring Merry and Pippin back to Saruman because they think that these hobbits have the One Ring, and now they're trying to bring it to him. And they're certainly running, and they meet up with another group of orcs, and these groups don't really like each other. And they decide they need to make haste because Legolas, Gimli, and Aragorn are chasing them. And, these groups are going to have a fight eventually. But yeah, anyway, Merry and Pippin are just kind of hanging on, I think Merry gets tortured by the orcs for a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These guys are brutal.
They're doing well, yeah. The orcs, they're extremely brutal, they are orcs, so they're pretty savage. So eventually on the pursuit with Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas, they meet some riders of Rohan. And Rohan's like a kingdom of men. And their king has been pretty messed up by one of Saruman's goons named Wormtongue. And, so the riders of Rohan, orcs are just riding through Rohan, and they're burning down villages, they're, like, killing a lot of Rohan's people, so...
They're being jerks.
Yep, they're being real meanies. And, so, some riders of Rohan, as they're called, they run into Aragorn, and they're like, oh, okay... We're going to, we're riding out for to kill some orcs, but we understand you can take these horses. They'll be fine. So yeah. And we cut to like this scene where a village is being burnt down, and a mother sends her children to the capital of Rohan to warn them of what's happening. And then the mother, presumably dies, and it's not exactly the best time. But eventually, word reaches the city of Rohan, and yeah, the king is not in good shape. As we see him, he's under some kind of spell, and he looks very decrepit, very old. He can barely function at this point, and it's not exactly looking good. And that's where we cut to Saruman, and Saruman, he needs fuel to make more swords and weapons for his orcs. So he decides to burn down the forest. That's right next to his little wizard tower. And this is going to come to bite him in the ass, as we see further on in this movie.
This does not work out well for him.
Because little does he know is that the forest is quite magical, and this forest is home to the Ents.
Treebeard.
Or the tree people, to those who don't know. Yeah. So, Treebeard and the Ents are like this extremely old race of sentient trees. And
yeah, they're just like, and what I love about Treebeard, and we'll get into it, is for most of the time at least, he's just observing. He's not, doing anything if it doesn't pertain to him. He's just observing, and he's just, he's there as like this wise tree figure. And if you don't love Treebeard, you're crazy.
Yeah, Treebeard is pretty neutral in the sense of it, because he really doesn't attack unless he's attacked. Treebeard he's a pretty chill guy. As you said, he's pretty wise. He's seen a few things, and yeah. So eventually, Merry and Pippin they escape the orcs after quite a bit of shenanigans. And they escape the orcs, and they run into this forest next to Sauron's wizard tower. And they run into this forest, and they're pursued by a orc that wants to eat them. But eventually, Treebeard accidentally kills the orc by stepping on him, and he picks up Merry and Pippin, and he puts them. He leads them to safety.
I love just the little banter between Merry and Pippin and Treebeard as they stumble across one another.
Yeah. I mean, I think that Treebeard is neutral, but when he just rescues Merry and Pippin for no reason, I like to think that he's more neutral good. So,
Well, yeah.
Treebeard is usually just chill. He won't really get involved unless he's attacked, but he'll do a good thing. And yeah, so Merry and Pippin get rescued by Treebeard, and eventually, Aragorn, Legolas and Gimli catch up to what is this battle site, and they see that most of the orcs are their corpses are being burned, and they find a piece of, I think it's Pippin's clothes, and they're like, oh no, they've been killed. And in anger, Aragorn kicks an orc helmet, and fun fact, the actor playing Aragorn actually broke his toe when he kicked this helmet, and that scream that follows, that scream of pain, is really real. So, what a trooper. But anyway, yeah. But eventually, Aragorn, being the ranger and tracker that he is, eventually finds out that, oh, they're fine. Or not that they're fine. He finds out, oh, they're alive. They crawled away. They crawled into the forest. And, after, they're like, okay, let's just go searching in the forest. And after they go searching in the forest, they run into a very special wizard.
Yes, sir.
So it turns out, as they're reaching this forest, they see a spell of some kind. It's like a blinding spell. They can't see who's casting it, but they're like, oh god, it's Saruman. And so they get ready to try to fight Saruman, but he blocks all their attacks, and it turns out it's Gandalf. Gandalf the White.
Yes, no longer Gandalf the Grey.
Turns out that since Gandalf is, as we mentioned before, a low-level angel, he was sent back and reborn into Gandalf the White. He's basically what Sauron should have been.
He has experienced a rebirth, and then, they're talking with him, they're seeing how Gandalf is, and, it's not amnesia, but because he's been reborn, but he's like, oh yes, Gandalf, that's what they used to call me.
Yeah, and he kind of explains what happened to him, and he kind of explains that he killed the Balrog on top of a mountain because their battle lasted for ages. It was quite the spectacle. So he ended up pushing the Balrog off a mountain and to kill the Balrog, but the Balrog also killed him in the process, so they killed each other. It was a draw in the end. But yeah. He is now reborn as Gandalf the Grey, and he's ready to kick some ass. He's ready to get back in it and, help the One Ring be destroyed. Oh, but yeah. So then we cut back to Merry and Pippin. Uh, they've woken up by now, and they're in like a clearing in the forest. And they eventually talk with Treebeard, and Treebeard's like, "Oh, hi, I'm gonna let you guys out." But then Merry and Pippin want to try to convince Treebeard that they need to help. Treebeard needs to help them.
Yes.
And Treebeard, Treebeard basically explains like, yeah, but I observe, but I don't get involved.
Yeah, he's like, I mean, I could wreck some shit, but I won't.
Yeah. But then, Pippin and Merry explain what's happening, and, Treebeard is like, okay, fine, I'll discuss the other Ents with the other Ents. And so Treebeard begins to gather some Ents. But yeah. While Merry and Pippin are having some shenanigans with Treebeard, we cut back to Frodo and Sam, or Frodo, Sam, and Gollum. Yeah. And they're trekking through the Dead Marshes, which is a place. It's like a swampland where a lot of people have died, and there's a lot of ghosts here. And Frodo's getting he's getting influenced by the ring. He's starting to get angry with Sam. He's insulting Sam and things like that. But yeah, anyway, Frodo falls in and he almost gets consumed by these ghosts in the marshes. But Sam pulls them out, and then a Nazgul is seen to be riding around.
Yeah,
Drake.
I just want to say, I appreciate one thing I enjoy about this is now that the party is split up, going back and forth between all these different groups, Merry and Pippin doing their thing, Frodo, Sam, and Gollum, it could get disorienting going from this to this, back and forth to all these different stories, right? And I think it's balanced very well, going from one to the other and so forth.
Yeah, I definitely think it's very balanced, and it's actually pretty paced well. It's pretty paced very well, and I think this is actually done really well, because usually when in a story or a movie, when you usually there's a saying, never split the party, but I think it's done really well in Lord of the Rings here, and it's done naturally. Because, all the different groups are separated for all different reasons, and they're trying to reunite, which eventually they will. And I think, yeah, as you said, I think it's paced pretty well. But yeah, anyway, a Nazgul flies over on a drake, and Frodo is, feeling the ring calling to him, and this is really where we get to see where Frodo starts to lose control to the ring. Because he's carried the ring for a while. I think by the third movie, he's been carrying the ring for 18 months.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
And we see Gollum, we see Gollum, who had carried the ring for years, and what the ring did to him.
And, yeah, there's this great back and forth scene with him talking to himself.
Yeah,
or I should say that two personas.
Yeah, that's, as I said earlier, Gollum kind of has split personalities. He kind of has the devil on the shoulder and the angel on the shoulder thing going on.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'd use to describe.
But he's not we don't see anything like him. We just kind of see him talking to himself, because Gollum is he's kind of insane. And yeah, so we see that Frodo's this ring is making him angry, or Sam is like, yeah, you don't sleep or you don't sleep a lot or eat a lot anymore. He's definitely not having a great time. And another thing I really like in this movie is I really like the Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli sections of this movie, because their banter between three of them is done extremely well.
Especially because they're such different personalities.
Yeah, I mean, these are three guys that are from three completely different lives. I mean, yeah, Legolas is from the noble elves. Aragorn is he's an estranged heir to the throne of Gondor, and Gimli is a dwarf. These things they definitely come from different walks of life, and they're just three guys trying to do a job together. And I think that's especially true in the case of Legolas and Gimli, because Gimli doesn't really trust elves, so it's really interesting to see them interact, and you can definitely see that they're starting to become friends. But yeah. After that, it's just they finally reach Rohan, and yeah, Gandalf mentions that like Merry and Pippin are safe, and they're like, okay, cool, let's ride to Rohan, because they've seen this orc party, and they're like, oh god, Rohan's getting messed up, and so they decide to talk to the king, because Gandalf says that he's old friends with the king, and so eventually they reach it, and they have to give up their weapons before reaching the king, and there's this really funny scene where Gandalf is like, he talks to the soldier, he's like, oh, you wouldn't take a walking stick from an old man, would you?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite lines in the movie.
Yeah, Gandalf's a cheeky one.
Yeah, he's intimidating, but he's also, he'll have fun while also being, a foreboding presence if needed.
Yeah, because Gandalf the White's a baller. We see it when he taught. He eventually...
He's been around the block, and now he's not afraid to have some fun while doing it, again.
Yeah, he literally died and came back. Anyway, yeah. So, Gandalf and the party, they talk to the King of Rohan, and as I said before, he's in bad shape with Wormtongue kind of like in his ear, telling him what is bad and what is good. He's like a puppet ruler.
Mm-hmm.
And so eventually eventually Gandalf, he kind of uses a spell to kind of force Saruman out of the king, and it works. And the king immediately like appears younger, and he has his senses back.
Yeah, I will say the makeup in this, like you said earlier, with the king looking all sickly and just like death, basically. Yeah, the makeup is so good.
Yeah, I mean, not just that. We have like these classic lines like, "Oh, you wouldn't take a walking stick from an old man," and you have where the king laughs and he's like, "Oh, you have no power here," and yeah. But eventually, the king picks up his sword and he's getting ready to kill Wormtongue, the man who has led his kingdom astray. But eventually, he doesn't do it. He just exiles Wormtongue. And Wormtongue runs to Saruman. And the king, he kind of looks at this situation. He's like, okay, we gotta ditch the capital. We're gonna get like messed up by these 10,000 orcs.
Yeah.
So he's like, okay, we'll flee to Helm's Gate, or Helm's Deep, sorry. And Helm's Deep is this. It's a fortress of Rohan. It's pretty much impenetrable except for one weakness that will be exploited. Yeah, and so the king's like, okay, we'll flee there and we'll hold out there. Oh yeah. Anyway, that's when Sam, Frodo, and Gollum reach the Black Gate of Mordor. And this gate is what separates Mordor from the rest of Middle Earth. And Sam and Frodo kind of just want to sneak through the gate, but then Gollum's like, "Oh no, you guys can't do that. You guys will get messed up." So Gollum offers to lead them through the mountains, and through the mountains is not. It's definitely it's a path, all right, but it's also home to one of Middle Earth's worst monsters.
Yeah, it's not a safe path at all.
No. It is the home of Shelob, or the giant spider.
Yes.
And, obviously Sam and Frodo don't know this yet. But they don't even go to they end up not going to the path, because as they're wandering towards the path, they get captured. And, they get captured by Faramir and, his troop of Gondorian soldiers. And Gondor is another nation of men. And Faramir is the king's son. And it turns out that he's Boromir's brother. And so Faramir learns of Boromir's death, and he's obviously upset about it. But we kind of get this little flashback, and we see that the king of Gondor, or Faramir and Boromir's father, the king didn't really like Faramir, and he definitely preferred Boromir.
Yeah, there's definitely a favorite child in that scenario.
Yeah, he was. It wasn't exactly like the most favorable for them.
Yeah.
But yeah. So they get captured, and Faramir is he's not exactly he. At first, Frodo and Sam don't tell them what they're on a journey for, and he's just kind of like, okay, we take them back to the Gondorian city with us, and this city is under siege. It's not exactly the best place to be. And we actually learned that the reason Boromir was sent on the Fellowship is because he was sent by his father to take the One Ring and give it to Gondor.
Yes.
But, as we all learn, Boromir was more honorable than that, and he agreed to escort the ring. So he went against his father's wishes, and unfortunately it got him killed. But you know what? He died for the
Who can blame him? Yeah.
Sacrifices had to be made, and he made a noble one, so that's okay. But yeah, they take him. They take Frodo and Sam to this city, and they also capture Gollum. And they are not very polite to Gollum at all. They're kind of beating him and kicking him, and
yeah, they're just abusing him for no reason.
Yeah, and so Frodo, and Gollum is pretty attached to Frodo because he's got the ring, and so he's like, "Oh, Master Frodo would never let us hurt." And this is where he talks to himself again, and he's like, we got captured because of him, and then he's like, yeah, I'm gonna take them to the mountain path, and they're gonna get killed by the spider. And so it's not exactly great. And so eventually through trial and tribulation, eventually Faramir discovers that they have the One Ring. And at first he's like, okay, we're taking this back to Gondor. We're gonna use Gondor is gonna use this weapon against Sauron. But eventually he lets them go. Anyway, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli are with King Theoden of Rohan, and they're kind of on a mass exodus to Helm's Deep, and on this exodus we learn that Aragorn is actually in his 80s.
Yeah, he's an old man.
Yeah, he's an old man. Because he's a ranger, his life is magically extended. Yeah,
he looks a lot younger than he is.
Yeah, he looks really young, but he turns out that he is.
I guess you could say that with a lot of people in this series. So
yeah. But yeah, so yeah. They're on this mass exodus, and eventually they reach Helm's Deep. And King Theoden and Aragorn kind of disagree because Aragorn's like, send out riders, we're not going to hold Helm's Deep. And the king is like, he's going to die on this hill. He's like, no, Helm's Deep has saved us in the past, it'll save us again, we're fine. And, eventually they reach Helm's Deep. And they've got 300 people. That's it against 10,000 orcs. Or at least what's going to be 10,000 orcs. And, yeah, so they decide to set up defenses and things like that. And then that's when Wormtongue arrives at Saruman's, and Wormtongue tells him that, there is one weakness. There's a sewer drain and underneath the wall of Helm's Deep, and that if you exploit it, you could get in. And so Saruman cooks up like this explosive, and he's getting ready to breach the walls of Helm's Deep, which has never been done before.
No. He's gonna try and charge on through.
Yeah, he's got 10,000 orcs. You know, he's got a little bit of cannon fodder here.
Well, that's light work for him.
Yeah, since orcs are apparently like just like out of like there's a lot of them. No, and so eventually the orcs do arrive at Helm's Deep, and we get the Battle of Helm's Deep, which looks amazing.
Yeah, all the battles and fight scenes in this film, I think this might be the one with the best fight sequences and choreography, just because they're so prolonged and you really get to see all the nitty-gritty of it all.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about this movie, because in the next movie, in Return of the King, the battle is just so huge, it's hard to see everything that's, going on.
Yeah, and this one you can actually, like, see what's going on, and because it's a lot, but it's not too much where you're overwhelmed with everything.
Yeah. But yeah, eventually, it starts to rain, and the orcs are, they're just chilling outside. They're getting ready to charge, and then a random elvish army shows up, and they're like, "Oh, hello, we got word that you guys needed help. Elves and men used to be, in an alliance, and we've come to honor that alliance. And Aragorn's elven friend is leading the army, and yeah. So now that they've got numbers, they set up on the wall." And the battle starts, and
battle ensues.
Things are looking pretty good. They've got this big wall until the orc sends in like a suicide bomber to blow up the wall, and so the orc just dives on in to this storm drain and completely blows up a portion of the wall.
Yeah, it is gone.
Yeah, and there's this really cool explosion. Like, this battle is just done technically so well, because so much of it is practical effects. It looks just so great. But yeah, eventually things are looking grim for the humans and the elves. The Aragorn's friend that's leading the elvish army dies, and things are looking pretty grim. They have to retreat to the inner keep, and a lot of the humans and a lot of the elves have died, but they're getting ready at the inner keep for a final stand. And everybody's pretty certain that they're gonna die. The king even says, like, "Oh, if we're gonna have to die, we're gonna give them an end so dramatic that they'll be singing songs of it."
Yeah, if they die, they're gonna have a story to tell.
Yeah, they're gonna go down swinging. But yeah. But eventually, Gandalf the White shows up on a hill, and he's come with a lot of cavalrymen, a lot of riders of Rohan, and we get this really beautiful shot of all of them charging down the hill and like slamming into the backs of the orcs. And with these new reinforcements, it's enough to turn the tide of battle. And and they send the orcs running eventually. All right, with the Battle of Helm's Deep over, it's that was quite the battle. It's definitely a spectacle to watch. There had to be like so much care put into that, with all the practical effects, all the extras that must take, the costuming.
Oh yeah, and all the little details on just the costumes.
Yeah, the fight choreography is really good, and we have all these moments of banter where Legolas and Gimli are arguing about how many orcs they've killed, and we get that scene where Gimli asks Aragorn to toss him, and he's like, "Oh, don't tell the elf," because last movie he said nobody tosses a dwarf.
I think the lighting is also great. It starts off, night, and then like it goes into like this. It's like not light out, but it's like there's like a grayish hue to it almost, and it just sets the tone for the fight at hand.
Yeah, there's definitely a grim start, and yeah. So the battle's over, and yeah. But anyway, back to Merry, Pippin, and the Ents. So Merry and Pippin, the Ents take forever to make a decision. They take like all day and night, and like the Battle of Helm's Deep is happening while they're having this discussion, and so they eventually the Ents come to a decision that they're not gonna go to war, and so. Merry and Pippin are obviously pretty upset, and Treebeard's like, "Oh, come on, I'll take you to the end of the forest." And that's when Merry and Pippin have a brilliant idea. They tell Treebeard to go the opposite direction because they can just sneak back to the Shire. They say, but in reality, this is a trick because they want Treebeard to see Saruman burning down the. I want to see Saruman burning down the forest. And eventually Treebeard does see it. And we get this really sad scene with Treebeard where he's like, a lot of these trees were my friends.
Yeah. I mean, they're literally burning down trees in front of an Ent.
Yeah. Not exactly.
That I don't think he's going to take too kindly to that.
Yeah, so he doesn't, and he roars through the forest, and he's like, "Oh, the Ents are going to war." And yeah, they walk into Saruman's little wizard keep, and they start wrecking shit. They're tearing down buildings, they're killing orcs. They release a dam that Saruman had built, and a river
start flooding it.
Yeah, a river starts to flood his keep, and Saruman does not take too kindly to it. Obviously, with all of this happening, the Ents, I don't think a lot of the Ents die because, like, we do see a few of the Ents being shot with like flaming arrows, but I think they
take it like a champ.
Yeah, but I do think that they live because of the the water extinguishing them. But yeah, now that everything is flooded, and this is where like the orcs are made, so this is a critical blow to the Shire, or not the Shire, or to Saruman's like forces. And we see Saruman just looking down, and he's getting pretty upset. But yeah, so now Sam, Frodo, and Gollum are on their way to this mountain pass. Faramir let them go, and he even makes the sacrifice and lets them go, and he threatens Gollum that if anything happens to them, he's gonna find Gollum and hurt him. And Gollum's trying to kill the hobbits, not by himself, but through the spider. And Merry and Pippin find a storeroom with a bunch of food. Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, and Gandalf, they claim victory at Helm's Deep. And so, yeah, it is definitely a decisive victory. And not only that, but the surviving orcs run into the forest and are absolutely massacred by the Ents in the forest.
Yeah, they are slaughtered.
Yeah. I think it was definitely a decisive victory, as literally no orc survived. Yeah, they don't take prisoners here. And I think it's notable that Gimli won the contest between Legolas and Gimli for most orc kills. We get this funny scene where Gimli makes fun of Legolas. He's like, "Oh, I killed 43, you killed 42," and Legolas shoots the corpse of an orc that Gimli was sitting on, and he's like, "Oh, we're tied now." He's like, "Oh no, that guy was twitching because I have my axe in his nervous systems." You know, it's the classic.
It's once again that little banter and that camaraderie starting to form.
Yeah. But yeah, it's pretty good. But yeah, with that, the little hobbits, Frodo and Sam, set out, and that's where the movie ends.
Another one in the books.
Yeah, and the last part of this trilogy, Return of the King, is obviously the last one. So we're gonna see how the quest ends. But this movie,
yes,
I think it's pretty solid. It's got a lot going on, and I think some people are going to enjoy the more simpler events in Fellowship of the Ring. But I personally like the Two Towers a lot. I think it's pretty good. I think it's paced pretty well. I think the battles in it are absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. For me, at some points, it did feel like it was dragging a little bit. But one thing I wanted to bring up that we didn't really talk about is how in this film, really, I think we start to see the friendship and bond between Sam and Frodo really start to form and grow just even stronger as compared to Fellowship. Because I feel like, for a long time, we're really with them and seeing them go through this.
Yeah, because this is the movie where the friendship's kind of tested for the first time, because Frodo's he's getting influenced by the ring, right? So he's getting angry at Sam, he's getting snappy, but he does have moments of clarity where he's like, Sam, this ring's taking control. And I feel like, that's definitely them bonding. But yeah, I think we need to mention Andy Serkis as Gollum. I think it's an absolute standout performance.
Oh yes, Andy Serkis. This was one of the major revolutionary things for motion capture performances in this series, and of course Andy Serkis is. A lot of people I don't think give Andy Serkis enough credit for just how much emotion he is actually able to convey through something like this and this kind of technology.
I think especially the two scenes where Gollum is talking to himself are definitely highlights of Gollum, because he's literally just acting with himself, and I think he does a pretty standout job, because you start to feel sympathy for Gollum because he's kind of crazy. Yeah.
Well, and then on the reverse of that, you have the other actors who have to act off of him. They're seeing this made up creature, this motion capture suit, and having to act off that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Also, as we said earlier, the battles in this movie definitely a highlight. I think in my opinion, they're definitely the best in the series.
Yeah, I agree.
Return of the King, the battles are extremely huge, because it's the last movie, it's the final battle.
Yeah, it's the closing out, it's the epic. And we'll get into more of that next episode.
And it's definitely epic, and it's great in its own right. But I personally prefer this smaller. This battle isn't small by any means, but it's not large enough where I can't keep track of everything that's
you don't feel overwhelmed, I think, is the main thing.
Because in this movie, it's just 10,000 orcs versus these guys, Battle of Helm's Deep, and we get everyone doing their thing. We get Legolas shooting arrows at orcs, Aragorn's in the mix, he's sword fighting, Gimli's with him with his axe. Yeah,
you're not getting lost in the battle with everyone doing their thing.
Yeah,
everyone has their part, and they are doing that part.
Yeah, and the same thing with the Ents. The effects on the Ents, especially Treebeard, are really good.
Oh yeah,
this is pretty solid for 2002.
I mean, how can you not love Treebeard? Treebeard's amazing, one of the best characters in the whole series.
Treebeard's pretty great. And yeah, I think also the voice acting for Treebeard is really good. I mean,
I want to double check this, but I'm pretty sure it's John Rhys Davies also doing the voice for Treebeard.
Yeah, well.
And as we know, Jean Rhys Davies is Gimli, so.
Yeah, and so, Treebeard, I don't know what kind of filter they used for him, because I don't think there's a tree filter, but he does pretty good. He talks slow, and he talks like a tree would, because he is a tree.
I mean, he's like, what, tens of thousands of years old.
Yeah, he's like eons old. he's like, in the lore, to enter like one of the first races to like ever be there. He's seen it all. And so Treebeard is a standout performance. Especially, again, the effects. I think this movie won the Academy Award for visual effects. I think it deserved it wholeheartedly. It's definitely extremely solid. Like all the costuming, the effects, the makeup. Again, the orcs look fantastic in this movie.
I mean, yeah, we're gonna be sounding like a broken record probably for these episodes, but
yeah,
you kind of just have to say it because they are, these effects are so good.
Yeah, pretty much everything that could be said for like Fellowship can be said for this movie. Yeah, it's just really
because there's not much change. Because there isn't a change; it's a continuation. So
yeah.
Are there any story points or anything we didn't touch on that we want to? I'm trying to think.
Yeah, I'm also trying to think. I don't know. Maybe we've said it all. Yeah.
Well, I guess we can do our final thoughts and ratings, and and then after that we'll close it up.
Yeah. All right. Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. I think it's a pretty solid film. It definitely captures the spirit or the essence of the novel, and I think it's a great continuation of the first one. Yeah. I mean, everything that we said, we've said it all at this point about this movie. So I'm gonna go ahead and give this movie an 8.5 out of 10.
Oh, see. So you like this more than Fellowship?
You know what? I'm probably gonna say yes, just because of like, especially what it sets up for the last movie, and the battles in this movie. I don't know. Especially because this movie has like Gandalf the White in it.
Oh, true. Yeah.
And Treebeard.
Oh yeah. That's the thing. Gandalf and Treebeard are like, they're scene stealers.
Yeah.
Whenever they're on. So for me, I don't know if I like this as much as Fellowship. There are some parts I really like, some characters who really come into their own in this sequence. I think the fight sequences are really good. But overall, I'd probably rate this one maybe a 7.5. When thinking about it compared to Fellowship, I think there are just some scenes I like more in Fellowship, like some of the, some of the world building. But saying that, it's not awful at all. I think it's a fine film, and it does what it needs to do, especially to set up for the big climax for the next film.
Yes. All right. Well, I believe that concludes our episode on Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers.
And if you enjoyed, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, recommend to a friend. We enjoyed doing this. We enjoyed talking about movies. Hey Nando, why don't you give a tease for next episode?
Oh boy, it's quite the mystery.
Yeah.
Of course, next time we'll be wrapping up the Lord of the Rings trilogy with Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King.
Yes. And then also maybe stay tuned for a little surprise that'll be dropping in your subscriptions. Maybe a bonus episode of sorts.
Yeah, maybe a little bonus episode that's got something to do with what we're talking about.
Who knows? We will see. Thank you for listening, everyone, and goodbye.
Goodbye, everybody.